I've had quite a unconventional journey into tech. My career was actually in theatre and creative writing. So you couldn't be further from tech or engineering, to be honest. And first of all, I mean, going on what Ella said as well, about not being afraid to make changes, 100%. And you're not like on one linear path. When I first started at uni, I realized in my first year of university that I didn't want to be an actor. I didn't want to be a director, but I was too afraid to make the change. I thought that I then had to commit to that path. That's what I'd chosen at university, and I had to stick to it, thinking it was too late. So I went through 3 years of university not knowing what I was going to do when I got out, and in fear of that, because I knew one thing for sure, that I didn't want to be competing against all those other people who were looking to get into that path, knowing that it wasn't really what I wanted to do in the long run, and it was more of a passion as opposed to something that I wanted to continue as a career. From university, I then ended up trying out like various different jobs. I went into English teaching, which was really incredible for the time because I was able to do some traveling with it, teach in different places in the world. Spent some time teaching English in Vietnam, which was amazing. But I knew it wasn't really a career path, and I had to find something a little bit more solid to do as a career. So I ended up sort of falling into technical recruitment. And from this was where my intrigue, I'd say, for engineering started. I was recruiting web engineers, front-end engineers, full stack engineers, and I was speaking to them on a daily basis about what they do. As time went on, I just became more and more interested in what they did. I looked into it more. I started to teach myself to code online. And there are so many free, incredible online resources for coding if it is something that you did want to try out. But you weren't so sure about. You have, for example, like Code Academy, Free Code Camp, just to name a couple of them, but there's so many out there. And I realized after doing some courses online that I actually really enjoyed it. My only sort of fear and holdback was that I was going to be up against so many, kind of competitors or people who would be applying for the same jobs as me that had been coding since they were 8 years old. Or whatever, I'd been gaming and got into coding that way, which wasn't me at all. I was 24 by the time I first started to learn code. So this was kind of a big fear of mine. But I decided to bite the bullet anyway, and I enrolled in a boot camp. There's quite a few around, which are really incredible boot camps. Mine was a software engineering boot camp called General Assembly that I did in London. And it was, I think, 3.5 months long in total. Very, very intense. You're working nonstop for that duration of time to learn the basics that you can to be sort of a full stack engineer. Mine was predominantly JavaScript full stack. So we focused on some front-end stuff, so HTML, CSS, JavaScript, especially React, and then on the back-end side of things, Node. So apologies for those of you that do, but when I'm saying front-end, do know, but when I'm saying front-end and back-end, front-end is more, if you think about the things that you do see and you interact with on a web page, and then the back end would be more the stuff that you don't see, that is more focusing on the data side, and you would communicate the two together. So I focus mostly on the front end side of things, so the things that you would directly be communicating with on a web page. And anyway, I finished the course. I ended up, like Dan, I got a job working for a digital agency. So that was my first role as an engineer, which again was really incredible. I got the chance to work on a variety of different projects, working with different tech stacks to sort of increase my skills. And it was quite overwhelming. I didn't know a whole lot. Like I had just started to learn code and done a boot camp, but everybody was so incredibly supportive. Nobody expected too much of me. I always had the tools that I needed to learn and keep progressing. So I really enjoyed my time there. And I probably wouldn't have left if it wasn't for the fact that I saw a job posting for ASOS, which I don't know if many of you are customers of ASOS. I'm sure some of you are, but this was where a lot of my paycheck was going. I love fashion, and I had now grown a huge passion for tech as well. So I loved the idea that I could combine these two passions together. But I applied for the job at ASOS thinking absolutely nothing of it. I was like, okay, apply for that, but it's ASOS. They're not going to want little old me. And I heard back from them, and I ended up getting the job there. And I've been with ASOS now for just over a year, and it's been absolutely incredible. And the learning and progression offered is just amazing, really. I don't actually work on the customer-facing website that you'll all see, but I work in the customer care department. So if you've ever had any issues or queries with an order of yours, and you reach out perhaps through live chat or email to a customer care advisor at ASOS, my team are responsible for building the application and maintaining the application that the advisors use in order to process any queries that you have, refunds or replacements, etc. So that's what we work on. And the past year that I've been working there has been pretty exciting, because we've actually been completely rebuilding the old platform, which the advisors were using, to a brand spanking new platform, which is kind of really incredible that ASOS listened to their advisors and listened to the fact that something they were working on was quite outdated. And although it wasn't directly customer facing, they could see the direct correlation of the efficiency of the customer care advisors and doing their job, and how that was important to update that with new technologies, which is what we've done. So hopefully, if you have any queries or you have to go through customer care process for any ASOS orders soon, then hopefully things will be speeding up and they'll be using the lovely new application that they have in place. I've kind of lost my train of thought there, but that's that about ASOS. I'm at a relatively different or quite different stage in my career, I guess, to Ella and Dan. I am considered by ASOS as a mid-level engineer, though as far as I see it, I'm really at the start of my journey in tech. As you've seen from both Ella and Dan, there are so many avenues and paths that you can go down in tech, and you can start out in one role. You could progress in that role. So, for example, just become specialist in engineering, or like Dan did, go into engineering directing, or go into data science, for example, like Ella. The possibilities are endless, and I struggle with the question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Because the scope in tech is so large and there are so many different avenues you could go down. Again, I feel like there's a theme in today's talk and today's panel about not being afraid to take on a challenge and not being afraid to make mistakes. So you may think you're going to do one thing, and it's great to have goals and to strive towards those goals. But if your path seems to be taking a different direction, don't refrain from doing that just because it doesn't sort of fit into the initial 5-year plan that you set out for yourself 3 years ago. Do the things that make you happiest and see where that takes you. Sure, absolutely. So I feel like my head was all over the place. I felt like I had a lot of pressure to know what I wanted to do. And for I by this point had already had a few different career changes and felt like I was trying to find my feet so much that um, when I was when I made the decision to invest time and money in the boot camp, because at the same time they're not cheap. I was afraid that it wasn't going to go right and I wasn't going to fail. I was going to fail. But then, like as everybody said, the advice that you tend to get is just don't be afraid to fail, because if you don't, then you will never. I would never have known what it could have come, what could have come from making that change. But yeah, I was terrified. If I'm honest, I was terrified, but I went with it anyway, and it was the best decision I ever made. So I always say, just don't compare yourself to others. Don't compare yourself to how far others have come. Don't compare yourself to how the person sat next to you on the course is doing and how they've managed to tackle the task that you're currently on. Um, because you can't guarantee that you're going to be the best in the room. You can't guarantee that you're going to be the first to solve a coding problem. But you can give it your best, and you're only going to get overwhelmed if you start trying to compare yourself to where everybody else is. Rather than comparing yourself to others, compare yourself to where you used to be. So I always like try to say, oh, okay, look at where you are now and look at where you were 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when you didn't know anything and you were writing your first line of code. So yeah, just don't compare yourself to what others around you are doing. Focus on you. That's probably the thing I love so much about it, is that no 2 day is the same, and there's also a level of unpredictability because priorities can change from the business. And you might walk into the day thinking that you're going to be working on the same problem that you were the day before, but no, there's a new priority, and it might take a bit of getting your head around head around that, but it's fine. You'll always have the time to do that, and the space to ask the questions that you need necessary. But definitely not, no 2 days are the same. We always start our days with team stand-ups where everybody goes through what they were working on yesterday, what they plan to work on that day, if they have any blockers stopping them from doing anything. And then we will progress with our day like that. We tend to all work on the same, what we call a sprint board. So we work in sprints, which happen every 2 weeks. And we'll have tickets on that board that all have priorities of things that need to get done. And once you've finished on your task, you then just go to the board, a little bit like a to-do list for everybody's team. You'll go to the board and see what's next in priority that needs to be done, and then pick that up, start working on it. Sometimes we'll pair program with other engineers, and sometimes you'll be working mostly on your own. Definitely not. But that's okay. Like, that's absolutely fine. I think that the best thing that I've come to learn over the past few years is that I don't need to know what I'm doing at all times, because I can figure it out as I go along. But yeah, definitely don't feel like I have it all together. I've still got so much to learn. I think the thing with tech is that it's constantly changing. So it doesn't matter where you are in your career, you'll always have things to learn, because we're just at a stage where it's growing so quickly, the possibilities are endless. And you have to be willing to learn to be in tech, because I mean, yeah, otherwise you're just going to fall behind. Okay, so I think, other than obviously not focusing on other people, and focusing on yourself and where you've come, I think I'd say, again, it's a focus thing, but focus on the things that you can do as opposed to the things that you feel that you can't do, and use them as a driving force to get you to do the things that perhaps you're currently struggling with. So if you get to the end of the day and you're like, oh, I haven't been able to do this, I struggled with that thing, I'm never going to be able to do this because I couldn't solve that problem. Just stop and start listing off instead all the things that you did do and all the things that you could do that day, and you'll be surprised that it's probably way longer than the things that you struggled with.